So what's going on and what's the news? Let's find out first of all what the news is about because this is what concerns us the most. Okay, so essentially what we have is on August 15th, President Trump said that he would meet with basically the U.S. is going to meet with Russia in Alaska. I don't know if you remember, but that used to belong to Russia at some point. But they're going to meet on August 15th. And following Putin proposal, there wasn't much additional information about the meeting. The Kremlin didn't immediately respond to requests for comments. Obviously, Zelensky says, why are you meeting without me? This is not good. I should be involved. All very important questions that needs to be resolved because what we want to make sure is that all these countries actually have a stake in it. Now, what's really going on, that's what we're going to try to find out. What do they really want? That's what we're going to try to find out. What we want to find out is what's behind all the positioning, what is behind everyone, what everyone is trying to do. That's the question. So the news is simple. August 15th, the U.S., Trump is meeting with Vladimir Putin, and let's see what happens. Let's see what happens during that meeting. The question, though, that we need to ask ourselves is the following. What is going on? So I will give you several perspectives. I will show you what the U.S. wants, what Europe wants, and what the U.S. the Russia wants, and what does Ukraine wants. But then I'm going to tell you what they really want, because what you want to know is what is really going on, and most importantly, what you want to know, apart from the news that they're meeting, is why is this important for you? And I will explain. I will explain everything. So let's first start by explaining. So what does the U.S. want out of this transaction? Why is this so important, right? So let's first start with Russia. Let's find out from Russia. What does Russia want, right? From Russia perspective, the ideal outcome of a deal with the U.S., it would center, basically, they want three things. They want territorial legitimacy. They want security guarantees, meaning the recognition of whatever the territory, that this is my territory and I want it and this is mine, whatever that territory is. I want security guarantees, basically stay away from me, right? Because don't forget, NATO got very close to Ukraine, right? And therefore very close to Russia. And, the U.S. Didn't particularly like the idea of having Russia in Cuba. I don't know if you recall that event, right? So there is something to be said about that. They also want sanction relief, and they want also political prestige. So you need to understand what Russia is up to and why this is a very important situation. So Russia wants four things. They want territorial legitimacy. They want security guarantee, meaning Ukraine will not join NATO, but that's not just enough. Sanction relief. I want to be part of I want to be able to deal with you guys again like I used to. Why am I being kept away? And I want political prestige, meaning that one thing you need to understand about Putin is that he's not doing all this for this. He's doing this for Russia. He wants to make Russia great again. So a deal that lets Moscow claim a victory at home, that's why he's not going to just pull back, and go home like nothing has happened. He wants to showing that Western powers had to negotiate power. Hey, Dido. Yes, Russia wants to get back into the fray, and Russia wants to show that that Putin, did a pretty good job, and he's protecting Russia. You need to understand. Now, at the end of the day, people say, "Well, this is so far away. What do I care?" No, you need to because ultimately you need to realize what the ultimate goal and why the U.S. is desperately, maybe not desperately, but is looking to make a deal with Russia. And you also remember one thing, okay? And this should be used for your own interest as well. Nations have no permanent friends or allies. They have permanent interests. You have to think of it in those terms. And you should, in your life, you should think of it, what's in it for me? What's my interest? You may like this person, you may not like this person, you may not care about this person, but maybe you need to do business with this person, because if you don't do business with this person, that is not going to be good for your interests. And I know that when you listen to all of the humongous amount of news that you see, they are really appealing to the emotional aspect of the situation, which, quite frankly, why shouldn't they? Because, if you say somebody's beating on someone else, somebody's getting hurt, somebody's getting moved, then obviously there is an emotional attachment to it, and therefore you feel engaged in the story, and you say, yeah, that's not right, you shouldn't be doing this. But they rarely tell you what's going on, what's really going on. And the reason they really can't always tell you that is because it would upset you and you would not like what you hear. And if you don't like what you hear, then you don't listen. Right? And the media is really bent one way or the other. And if you don't want to hear that, then you say, I don't want you to tell me this. Tell me that this is a good thing. Yeah. The reason they're attacking is because they want to protect these people. Ah, okay, that makes sense. Well, that's not really the real reason. What do you mean that's not the real reason? Don't they want to prevent people from dying? Yeah, no, that's true, but there's something behind it. Right? And what is this thing? And that's what this channel is about. Because this channel is about explaining to you what is going on so you could make your own decision as to what you want to do, where you want to go, what you want to buy, and what you're going to do next, and the job situation, the stock market. Because believe it or not, all this is all tied up together. And the more you understand the world that you're living in, the better off you're going to be. Okay, so what does Russia want? Well, basically what they're saying, I want security guarantee, and I want the sanction relief and economic reconnection. I want to be back in the world, and I want political prestige. But what do they really want? That's the question, right? I'm going to tell you what they really want. Beyond Ukraine, Russia also wants to use any deal, and this is where it gets tricky, to drive a wedge between the US and Europe, right? And between the US and its other allies. So you could imagine the kind of a conversation where you can't possibly imagine, because most of us will never be there. But the type of discussion that you have to have, well, when you're going to sit in front of Putin and knowing what I know, because now that you know, that Putin, deep down, his interest is obviously he wants to come out not a loser, he wants to be a winner, but he also wants to make sure that you stay away, or you are kept away, or you are moved away from Europe, right? Because basically what they're all doing, including the US, they want to make sure no one gets too far ahead of them, right? That's what China is doing, that's what Russia is doing, that's what the US is doing. And they all want to make their country great again, believe it or not. They may not always say it that way, but they all want to do it the same way. You are looking for your own interest. You're listening to this channel, for the sake of saying, am I going to learn something today? On a Sunday, am I going to learn something? Am I going to know something now? Is this guy going to say anything that I care about? What is it for me, right? That's what it's about. What it's about is understanding. And right now, you need to understand that Russia's position is, at the end of the day, because you have to understand also the people involved, and Putin, as the worst thing that's ever happened to him, according to what I've read, is that the fall of the USSR. That was the worst thing that ever happened to him, and he cannot stand that, and he wants to bring back Russia to its glory days. That's a tough order, because everybody else is already played in and anchored in and everything else. So that's going to be a very, very difficult thing to do, but he wants to do it, and he is going to try every aspect of this to make it happen. So beyond Ukraine, Russia wants to use any deal to drive the wedge between the US and Europe and between US and its allies. The more divisions among the Western partners, the more maneuvering he can do globally. Now, of course, you have to understand one thing, and this is my biggest concern of all, because this channel is about looking for black swan, looking for the worst thing that happened. The risks in, obviously that's going to impact your job and it's going to impact your stock market and your way of living is, if all these countries are after the same goal, there's not much maneuvering left after a while. And when there's not much maneuvering left after a while, you know what happens, right? You know how you clear the air, you schedule everything back to zero, you have conflicts. Conflicts is how things get resolved after a while if you can't agree. And if you don't want to stay where you are in your own side of the yard, then you're going to have a fight. And that's the concern. The concern is a fight. We're not there yet, but the way they're positioning. So, okay, so we know what Russia wants. Fine. What does Europe? Because now Europe is saying, whoa, wait a second. Don't do that. What do you mean? These guys are going to meet together with that Ukraine and they are going to decide to what? To split the countries and Russia is going to take what it wants and it's have to invade it. That is not fair. That should not happening. No, you should not agree to such a thing. So, point number 3, and I got 8 points to make here, but what does Europe really want? Well, they want to basically make sure that, as you've heard over and over and over, they want to make sure that we preserve Ukraine's sovereignty and we keep Ukraine in a driver's seat and we maintain pressure on Russia. Basically, we want to make sure that Russia gets weaker. Long-term security guarantees. Most European capitals want to sustain an even tighter sanction until Russia withdraws from a power territory. They believe that easing pressure too soon would embody Moscow undermine deterrence. So basically, they want to keep pushing on Russia and weakening. So at some point, it will stop. And they want long-term security guarantees. Beyond the war ends, Europe is pushing for binding, enforceable security arrangement with Ukraine, possibly NATO-like commitment. So basically, stop fighting and yes, get away, lose everything that you've gained so far. I mean, and then we'll make sure that NATO, we make sure that NATO doesn't get too close to you, right? Is that what you want? So Europe is less focused on a quick ceasefire because that's the end result, right? Even though you're trying to help Ukraine in a way because you want to preserve their sovereignty, you are also extending the fighting, basically. Because what you're asking for is going to be tough. And I will show you some statistically what are the odds that these things are going to happen. Right? I'm going to show you what could potentially happen. And don't forget to keep me going with some of those super chats so I could buy myself coffee at the end of this discussion. So Europe is less focused and more, and it wants a just settlement. But as you want all these things that you said that you want, you are also extending the war, okay? So it doesn't regard aggression, doesn't sideline Ukraine, and locks in future security. But the issue with that, obviously, is that the war is not just going to end that quickly. Plus, frankly, you're not inviting to the table, right? No one asked Van der Leyen to go to Alaska with Trump and Putin. They're going to talk to each other. They don't really care what Ukraine wants to do. That's the issue. Okay, so but then what does Ukraine want, right? What does it want? Well, Ukraine goals, basically, they want full territorial restoration. I want to get everything back. I want legally binding security guarantees from NATO. I want justice and accountability. I want basically all the war crime, all the aggression, reparation from Russia, sustained economic and military support from the area. I want no negotiation without Ukraine on the table. I want everything, basically. So let me ask you a question right now. Let me do a quick poll and ask you the following. Right. I want to know if let's see how you guys feel. I have enough people to ask a question. Do you feel that the meeting that's going on right now, so let me start a poll right now. And so basically the question is this. Do you view the Russia-US meet favorably? Okay. And as you're answering this question, I want to keep going. And you're going to see what the people really think. Okay. So Ukraine wants a lot, full territory restoration, basically return all occupied territory, including Crimea, that basically the U.S. under Obama, let Russia have in 2014. They want the 4 eastern southern seas since 2022. No land for peace deal. They want NATO membership, or at least NATO guarantee. They want justice, accountability. They want sustained economic military support. So basically, they want to keep help, and they want no negotiation without Ukraine at the table. So they want complete victory, permanent security, and justice. Well, that likely hopefully it sounds fair. Let me see how we're doing. Oh wow, most of you don't view the Russia-US meet favorably. Wow. It's not a negotiation, it's just another. Well, this is where you have to be careful, Pete. This is what it might appear from the outside. Didn't Taco promise to end the war on day one? Well, yeah, but obviously it's a lot complicated. You need to understand what's driving these people. You need to understand what's driving these people. And frankly, what's driving these people? Okay, I'm seeing some yeses. Okay, I need some yeses to see. I'm curious to see what the mood is. I want to see exactly what you guys feel. That do you view the U.S.-Russia meet favorably? Meaning that, well, yeah, you guys should meet, and we need a conclusion. Because if you say no, that means, well, then keep on fighting, right? Because unless there's a winner, but Russia now has a war economy. Okay, that means that they're producing, and that's all they do. I don't know how much percentage of their GDP, but it's a huge amount, and they're doing quite fine so far. And of course, the more they fight, and the more they get weakened, and this is the point to this ultimate point to this this live, is that they're going to get closer to China, and I think. And that's one of the points I'm going to try to make. I believe that the reason the U.S. is doing all this is because it wants Russia to remain the same way Russia wants to keep the U.S. away from the Europeans. In a way, the U.S. is trying to keep Russia away from China. And that's why there was this always this discussion, oh, it looks like Trump likes Putin and Putin likes Trump, But listen, here's a famous line for you that you should take it and use it. Nations have no permanent friends or allies. They only have permanent interests. You have to start seeing it from that perspective. Okay? You have to realize that these people are talking. There's not just one guy going on a plane, another guy going on a plane. They're meeting and they talk shop. No, there's like a huge amount of advisors behind them telling them, well, if you do this, and he says that, and he does this, and that's what's going to happen. And after that, if that happens, then this is going to be impacted, and that's going to be impacted, and this and that. It's like a chess game, right? So we need, at the end of the day, if they don't meet, and I'm going to double check again to make sure we're on the same page, and everybody, no, we still have a no. Nobody wants. So basically, most of you right now feel that don't meet, or maybe you just don't care. You figure, who cares? I'm not in Ukraine. I don't know anyone there. I am not going to go to Alaska. What's have to do with the price of bread? Well, my friend, I will tell you one thing. And this is point number 11. Let's skip to the 11. Why you should care? Well, for the average American, Ukraine might feel far away. The conflict, security, economics, in a way is a direct. But Washington treat as important to the American people. That's the reason why, because it's preventing a precedent for aggression. Remember, if he gets, quote unquote, gets away with it, and he gets in there and does what he wants and get what he wants, and somehow things work out for him, remember, you've got Russia, you got China that's doing its own thinking, and we'll do something special on that at some point. But they're also eyeballing Taiwan. Not so much that they want to acquire Taiwan, but that's one piece they know, that once they do that, they start something, right? And they want to start something at some point. They may have to start something at some point. They may have no choice but to start something at some point because of the situation they're in. Okay? They want to protect NATO and its U.S. allies, right? At the end of the day, you want to make sure that, obviously, the U.S. have a very good relationship with NATO right now, since they're now spending money. So, that's how you keep the peace. Economic stability and energy prices, maintaining U.S. global influence. You want to be in charge. And frankly, at the end of the day, defense industry and jobs. Military aid to Ukraine cycles money back into the U.S. system. And it's very good for the U.S. So this impacts you. And obviously, if there's a big war and this gets out of control and Russia gets weak and then they get the help of China and China gets involved somehow, then oil prices and then inflation and then the stock market and then all these things. So there's not much you could do about it, right, yourself, but you need to know what's going to happen. The same way when you're crossing the street, you need to know, look left and look right. Do not be taken. Yes, listen to the news, but that's easy. It's difficult. Like everything in life, so far, most of you still view the Russia-US meet not favorably. You do not think. Double tap the screen, people. Just Ryan, not as bad as U.S. as to sales to the U.S., but diplomacy is very important. It is. You can't negotiate without Ukraine having any input. That's true too. But what I've just told you, right? What Ukraine wants, and what Ukraine wants, is a lot technically. Not from their point of view, but from what Russia wants, that's just not going to happen, right? And Europe basically wants to keep this thing, quote unquote, not that they want to keep it going purposely, but because of what they're asking for, which is close to what Ukraine wants, then that's not going to happen, because if you know anything about Russia, they're not just going to go home and he's not going to come home as a loser. And they say, fine, you keep fighting and you're getting weak. But if he gets getting weaker, then he's going to get closer to China, which is against what the U.S. wants. The U.S. wants to make sure that, don't forget, Russia helped save World War II. I just want to give you a bit of a history here. Right? If it wasn't for Russia, that kept the Russian troops, that kept the German troops busy on the west, on the east, right? And that's why the Russian at the time of Yalta, they wanted to sit down at the table. They deserve a seat at the table. So at some point, the U.S. and Russia, got along for some reason, right? Because they had, again, interests. There's no good guy and no bad guy. You gotta stop thinking. You have to think in terms of their interests. It was in the interest to do it. It was in the interest of the U.S. to have Russia involved, to keep, right? Okay, now I'm getting 22 votes. I'm waking up everyone. And 50-50. 50-50 people. So now we're getting somewhere. Meaning that lots of you feel that, you know what, this could be... Now, of course, a lot of you may say, no, because you don't care. Well, you do care because you're voting, or you may not understand. what they really want, but you need to really grasp behind the headline, and then you could use that for your own life as well to understand what does this person really want. Nobody wants something just because they want something. It's because they need something, right? They need to feel good. They need more money. They need something. Anyway, so that's what Europe really wants, right? Of course, the Russia impact, if Europe wins, if Europe gets exactly what it wants, which is that's what you're going to realize it's going to be difficult, full Ukraine sovereignty, no territorial concession, sanction largely intact, it would almost certainly leave Russia more isolated and dependent on China. Economic isolation would deepen. Without sanction relief, Russia only large-scale market and financial channels would remain China, India, and a few others. That's it. That's all they could sell to. You need to care about that because you're pushing Russia in the arms of someone else. Do you really want to do that? Do you think it makes sense? China, in particular, could leverage this to dictate energy prices, control supply chains, and gain greater political influence over Moscow. They say, hey, I'm going to do this, but I want something in return. There's no incentive to engage a race. A peace deal on Europe terms would be closer to a Russian defeat. That is not going to happen. Please read what's going on. Read about Putin. You may like him, you may not like him, but he's not going to take a defeat. Do you know how many years he's been in power? You may agree or disagree the way he came in, but this guy is not going to say, you know what, okay, fine, I lost, take it back, go home, I'm sorry, and make sure NATO stays over there. That's all I wanted. No way, that's not going to happen if you understand the principle. Military and technology dependence with Western defense permanently off limits, Russia would deepen its reliance on Chinese dual-use tech, drone and electronic. They're going to get closer. Beijing already supplies key components Russia can't produce domestically at scale, so they're doing it very quietly. You don't hear much, but it's happening. And Russia is, if you believe that Russia is losing the war, that means that they're getting closer to China, not just going away and retreating back. You would have geopolitical balance loses traction. U.S. strategists often talk about peeling Russia. Not just me talking about. Now we're talking different level of people, obviously, and which I want you to belong to, but U.S. strategics, right? Strategists, basically peeling Russia away from China to split the authoritarian bloc. A maximalist European peace plan would do the opposite, cementing, and that's why they're not being invited. They said, listen, no. Because that's the reason why at the end of the day, the U.S. is going to meet with Russia over in Alaska. It's not for the benefit of anyone but the U.S. at the end of the day. That I want to keep my friend close, otherwise he's going to become my enemy. Or I want to keep my enemy, well, you know the movie. I want to keep my enemy closer. I want to keep him close. And this is good for you to learn that. So when you listen to the news, you're going to say, oh, now I see it. Now I see what's going on. That is a problem. That is a situation. Let me take a look at the results of, 31 votes. Well, still no. Okay. So most of you, couldn't make it. Most of you do not like the idea. You don't view this meeting favorably, so therefore don't meet, keep it going. Okay. Well, then let me ask you another question. Okay. How about that one? Should Ukraine concede territories, right, to get this thing done? So technically, you should say, so the next question is, what do you think that they should give up some territories to get this thing going? And who knows, maybe somebody's watching it and they make a decision on that. We shall see. But anyway, that's not the point here. The point is for me to educate my subscribers, and don't forget to subscribe. Guys, I want to learn. I want you to learn and understand what's really going on in this world so you realize that there's more to it than meet the eye. Okay. We'll be forced to give up territory, and then in a few years they will have to give up more. Well, that's the question, right? That's the question. Will you have to give up? I got you, Carmine. Um, so at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to understand what's happening. We're trying to see what's going on, and we're trying to figure out what everyone wants. And let's see what everyone wants. But I could tell you right now, what's going on is that the situation is what Europe wants. They basically want total capitalization from Russia. So of course you're going to say, but they know that as well, right? They know that. I mean, the Europe knows that. I mean, if I know it, and don't forget everything that I'm telling you right now, you may not be completely aware of, and now you are aware. Obviously, I want my subscribers to be educated, but they also know this as well. So how do you fix a situation like that, right? When everybody has diverging, um, everyone have diverging views, and that's a problem. How do we fix diverging views? I will tell you, because right now because we only have interest, and what really wants is Europe is less focused on a quick ceasefire, more on a just settlement. And if Europe wins what they want, and Russia is going to be forced to essentially be isolated, more dependent on Russia, more dependent on China, and China is not going to do this for free. They're going to want something in return, more cooperation, more dependence. So what does the U.S. want? What does it really want? Well, obviously, the U.S. want to hold the conflict quickly, right? And the reason why you want to do that is because at the end of the day, um, the U.S. want to achieve a ceasefire. At least ending U.S. involvement, because what's happening right now, don't forget the situation in the U.S. as well. As the more involved you get, the more fighting is happening, and the more weapons you give. Don't forget, in the U.S., the MAGA people do not view this involvement in a very good way. So that's something else that you need to worry about. You need to worry about the fact that the MAGA people, which MAGA is very strong. MAGA basically has has a lot of power in the U.S. And without it, Trump and the U.S. administration would have difficulties get things done. That's a and they do not. So basically, this meeting for the U.S. is stop the ceasefire. We're not involved anymore. We don't have to sell weapons to Ukraine, right? It means tacitly recognizing Russia control over some Ukrainian territory. Because at the end of the day, the U.S. is probably more realistic. Is that I mean, this guy is not going to go back. Okay, look what he did. Look how much he did. Balancing carrots and sticks. Diplomatically, the U.S. has signaled it may offer improved relations and remove NATO accession, but only if Russia halts the aggression. At some time, it has warned of heightened sanction if Russia refuses to negotiate. But you took them away from the SWIFT system. You weaponized the dollar against Russia. What else can you do? And that's why went after India, which is another topic, because then India also, you want to keep India away from Russia. And securing economic interests through a mineral deal. Don't forget, U.S. Mineral Resource Agreement could have granted the U.S. joint access to Ukraine natural resources revenue tied to U.S. construction investment. So they want the rare mineral as well, reasserting U.S. foreign policy autonomy. So you broker a peace deal, it'd be great for the U.S. And most importantly, yes, it is plausible strategic layer behind the U.S. push to a deal that you want to have a Chinese connection. While the public framing focuses on ending the Ukraine war, because that's what people understand and they could see, they could feel. They say, yes, stop the fighting, right? Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I want to stop the fighting, so we don't have to send weapons. Analysts note that detaching Russia from China, or at least loosening their growing strategic alignment, could be a major long-term U.S. objective. Let's see how we are doing. No. See, that's the thing. 70% so far, 68%. A lot of people are basically saying, no, don't give up your territory. It's a nice deal if you could get it. 69% no. Okay, so let's give him some more time because now I have more and more people joining. One thing with let's see. Okay, so the next thing that's happening, obviously, is it would limit China's strategic depth. It would break the no-limit partnership. Now, remember one thing: since early 2022, that's a term that you need to understand. Is that Moscow and Beijing have deepened political, economic, and military ties, presenting a united front against U.S.-led alliance. They're gotten together after 2022. Obviously, when Biden basically said, I'm going to weaponize the dollar, get you out and kick you out and put lots of sanction on the activity. Therefore, now you are out, and therefore, right away, Beijing and Moscow got together. Was that a smart move? If Washington can strike a settlement with Russia that improves relation, it could reduce Moscow's dependence on Beijing. I believe that deep down, at the end of the day, that's what these guys are looking for. They want to stop that relationship. Limiting China's strategic depth. China benefits from Russia as a sanction-busting partner, a source of cheap energy and military technology collaborator. Right? China needs the oil from Russia. Weakening that link would complicate Beijing's ability to withstand U.S.-led economic pressure, especially if tensions over Taiwan escalate. Now, what we're seeing here, basically, hopefully by now you realize that, but these people are never going to agree. That's never going to happen. Right? 32 votes. Let's get 50 and then we'll see, because I want some real statistical sample here. Right? So there's a poll right now. And make your voice heard. I mean, should Ukraine concede territory? Something, anything. Cold War precedent. In the 70s, the U.S. flipped China away from the Soviet bloc. And that's why Nixon, I don't know if you remember, some of you, I think some of you, because based on the age of my subscribers and people that watched this channel, you would remember this. The U.S. flipped China away from Soviet bloc once before. And I was like, that's the one thing that Nixon was known for. And then, of course, Nixon did another thing. He basically, and in the 70s, he ended the gold standard, right? At one point, the dollar was backed by gold. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, by the way. Come to you every day. Interesting topic. I want you to learn something. I want you to understand what's happening in this world that we live in. So basically, he ended the war. He ended the gold standard. And that was a major move, because the gold always backed the dollar since the 70s. Because you need just a piece of paper at the end of the day. But now you could exchange your dollar for gold. But then Nixon said, no more. You know what? We're so powerful, we're so strong, and we're so the best of the best. We are going to remove the gold. We don't need the gold. We just need to print the paper. And that was a big issue. People thought this was like the tariffs, basically. Oh my God. What did you do? What if it doesn't work? What if people said, what do I need a piece of paper for? And it worked. And it made the U.S. even stronger. And the market took off, and that's what happened. Kissinger was more responsible for things than Nixon, say Carmine. Yes, that's true. I mean, correct. Kissinger was, he did a lot of good things. Some people say he did a lot of bad things in South America as well. But maybe we should do a topic on Kissinger, because he was a very interesting person. You may like him, may not like it. It's just interest for us to find out. But basically, so 4 reasons why the U.S. wants to keep this China connection away. It's breaking away no limits partnership. They want to limit China's strategic depth. They want to do Cold War precedent, like what happened, mirror. Some finance policy strategists see Ukraine settlement as a mirror image opportunity. Tilt Russia slightly and denied China a powerful partner. You don't want China and Russia together. That's a lot of damage because they are next to each other and they're close and they're powerful. Geopolitical bargaining chip. If Russia feels it can get security guarantees without relying entirely on China, it may be more willing to hedge its China ties. Because maybe at the end it doesn't really want to be with China. But if you're forcing it, don't forget, in World War II, Russia saved the day, literally. Even partial distancing would win a win for global strategy. So that's where we stand. Okay, now I got 45 votes. Let us see what the result is. I'm scared to see what. Nope. Wow. Was anyone threatening the Russian border? When? World War II? No. Well, yes. Yes. I mean, Germany thought they could do both, because at some point when D-Day happened, they were fighting to the left with the Americans. The Americans, there weren't that many Europeans involved, at least in the landing, right? There's a story that basically that when they invaded, at D-Day, it was mostly American people that saved France and Europe. There weren't too many French people. I mean, they were fighting, in France, but they weren't like battalions and battalions jumping over. And that's why you have this, I don't know if you've ever been there, but there is this cemetery in Normandy, and it's an amazing place. It's guarded and protected by the US. Everyone should go there because, I mean, they never went home. They died. All these American soldiers died for Europe and peace. And, I mean, there's stories behind, obviously, that America really, the American Roosevelt really didn't like the French president. He wanted to keep the other guy in. I mean, there's lots of stories that really would surprise people. But at the end of the day, these people died. It's a beautiful place. Everybody should go see it. It's very peaceful. There's not a sound, that's what's amazing to me. So 69%. Well, I'm afraid this dog don't hunt here. Basically, 68%. I was told that I always feared China as China was massive troops and tanks and missile crews. Yes. Well, China is not going to invade Russia. How did the 204 knocks go away? Well, yeah, exactly. They're not. That's not happening, Robin. I mean, they're not pushing for that, and they're not going to go there to see. The idea what Robin is talking about is we're going to check how much gold is left at the Federal Reserve. But hold that thought, you never know. They may want to go there and check it regardless, which could be a very interesting prospect. So, China connection, we're trying to keep China away. Okay, so then, so so much information. So where do we stand? Well, I will tell you. In terms of territorial control, Ukraine, what they want, full restoration. I want everything back, including Crimea. Now, you got to wonder, but you have no weapons, you have nothing. I mean, this is a tough call to ask for in this situation, knowing who you have in front of you, right? What the U.S. wants, possible acceptance of a freeze or partial Russian control if it ends the war quickly. Well, we got to be realistic, people. The Russians are not going to give up anything. Europe, no recognition of annexation, but some may accept a freeze if tied to security guarantees. That is going to be very unlikely to happen, right? I mean, Crimea is lost. They have already moved in. They have changed. That should have been stopped in 2014 if you want to do it. But the previous administration did not want to deal with it. I mean, they have. Don't forget, and please understand that there's a lot of information. Don't think that. Well, then Russia wanted to invade the neighbor just because. Well, there's a history between these countries. There's reason why they're doing it. Remember, think of it more of as interests more emotional, like, why invaded this poor country and these people didn't. Well, I think my understanding is they want it to be Russian, but who knows? Security guarantees. So NATO membership. So what Ukraine want, they want NATO membership. Well, but understand that Russia is saying that no, I don't want NATO anywhere near me. Right? You didn't want the Russian in Cuba, U.S. Right? You didn't want that. So why should I accept an enemy so close to me? I don't want that. Europe security. Strong security commitment, possibly NATO hybrid guarantees. So they say, well, maybe we could let them in. But the U.S. is no. Security guarantee short of NATO. Right? There's no NATO. We do not want NATO involved at all in this situation. So that's a problem, right? You don't want NATO. What's going on? Everything is going on right now. We're in trouble. Basically, what's happening, just keeping up, CCS wants to know what's happening. Well, basically, we're trying to figure out what is the real goal, what's really happening. Has Russia ever threatened NATO? Yeah, it's not really, but I think it's the other way around, that NATO is getting closer and closer and closer to Russia. Right? So, right? It's basically a problem for them because they're getting closer and closer, and they do not want this. They do not want to be close to. They don't want. Russia really doesn't want. I mean, these are, at the end of the day, these are kind of simple things, I think, that everybody should be able to understand, but not so fast. Not so fast. Because what's going on right now is they're getting closer and closer, and the closer they get to Russia, the more pressure there is, and the more pressure Russia pushes back. And as it pushes back, it's getting weaker, and as it gets weaker, it gets closer, or if it's not getting weaker, it's definitely getting closer to China, which the U.S. doesn't want. And the U.S. really doesn't want it to happen because that's going to be a lot of damage over time. In terms of the sanctions, right, Ukraine maintain until all territory restored and reparations begin. That's a tough sell. The U.S. is willing to trade partial sanction release for Russian concessions. I mean, basically, there's going to be some sort of concession. Europe maintain and increase until Russia withdraws. Right? Knowing that that's not going to happen, knowing that Russia is going to weaken, but then knowing Europe is the problem with Europe is it's probably not very consistent because there's lots of people, there's 27 countries involved in there. And they know what's going to happen if Russia gets weaker. But I guess for their point of view, say, well, I don't care about the US wanting China to be separated. What I care mostly is I don't want Russia to be so strong and right there. Yeah, but what you're doing, you may be pushing them closer to Russia. To China. And then as they get closer, what are you going to do? Not so much that there's going to be an invasion of Chinese and Russian into Europe, but the point is, it's not that, because they all have the nuclear bomb, so they could destroy themselves 100 times over. That's not going to happen. What can happen is then politically and then economically they're going to be stronger. And then as a person in the street every day, price is going to be more expensive. Your livelihood is going to be impacted. That's the problem. Right now, my friends, right now with China, what's happening with China, because they have such huge amount of deflation, they're sending a lot of stuff in Europe, a lot, at a cheap price, and it's depressing the prices that you get from, that you sell in Europe. And that's a problem. Why? Because now the price, as a business, you can't sell for $10. You got to sell for $8 because the stuff is coming from China at $7. So then you can't pay your people. And the same thing happened here. What you have to worry mostly, I mean, people think of it in terms of war. So that's easy to think. I'm going to kick you. But that kind of war is very unlikely. unless an accident happen, unless they're really in dire situation. But no one wants the war. Look what's happening with Russia. Who wants the war? Look what's happening with Ukraine, right? And the only reason it's happening to Ukraine is because they don't have the atomic bomb. Otherwise, that would never happen. So that's never going to happen. But what can happen, and this is why John Stephen, the past 1,000 years, European have wars every 20 years, didn't happen. US troops stop all those wars. Yes, you need you need a sheriff in town, right? But you have to worry, and this is where I believe it's going to impact you, is that if these people get together, right, and control, and then they control prices and they control inflation, then it impacts you. If there's a problem in China with Ukraine, and this thing doesn't get resolved, then oil prices go up, and then the market goes down. And then if there is a strong commitment to each other and they commit to each other, because don't forget, ultimately, the biggest fear that I have is that these countries say, you know what, we're not going to fight with you. In fact, we don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. We are decoupling. We're going to, Russia and China and India, wow, that's a lot of people right there. I don't need to sell to the American people. And frankly, I don't want to buy from you anymore. In fact, I don't even need your dollar. I don't need your dollar anymore. That's the concern that you should have, that ultimately these countries, there is a principle that says that basically at some point, China is going to withdraw once it knows and understood and knows to build all these things. I mean, technology speaking, they are pretty advanced. And then you have all the energy you could get from Russia and all the people to sell it from India. What do you need the US for? That, I believe, is the biggest concern that the US administration has for the future of the US, is that at some point, we're going to be left alone. We are going to be left alone. And don't forget, nothing lasts forever. The Roman Empire didn't last forever. The Spanish Empire didn't. Remember we used to say that the sun never sets on the English Empire? It sets every day now. Okay, so now it's the US, but how long are you going to be able to keep it up? Because then, obviously, it's going to impact you. Even if there is no war, where are you going to get your iPhone from? Why? You're going to have to make it in the US. It's going to be more expensive. Where are you going to get the oil from? Well, we're going to have to draw from the ground here because we can't get it from anywhere else anymore. Not that we need it. Where are you going to get because don't forget, I'm sure we know that by now, but I want to remind you that right now the U.S. is, I wouldn't say is, basically what's happening with the U.S. is that it is running out of time. And that's the other thing that's driving this whole story. The U.S. is running out of time. For example, in terms of the clock is ticking in the U.S. The U.S. global manufacturing output. Now forget, if they close their doors and they deal with each other, all three of them, they don't need the U.S. anymore. Things can happen, right? Just because you live in the world right now doesn't mean it's going to be like this forever. Don't forget what happened with COVID. We always thought that, what do you mean I can't leave my house today? That can't happen in the U.S. I do what I want. No, you can't. What do you mean I need a jab and I need to get the vaccine. I don't want to take it. No, you have to, otherwise you're not working. What? You know what I mean? So things can happen. And in this particular case, with the U.S. industrial competitiveness slowly but surely declining from the U.S. share of global manufacturing output was 30% in 2000. Now it is 16% today. Wow. Let me do another, because I have lots of people on and I want to hear from a real statistical sample, and then we're going to come back to why the clock is ticking, because I want to really understand what everyone is thinking about. So, should the U.S. continue to sell, since most of you say, don't concede territory, right? I don't like the meeting. Okay, nobody says no. Should you continue to sell weapons to Ukraine then? If you want to get involved, then don't get involved at all, right? So let's do a very quick survey. Here we go. I'm curious to see what happens now. So the question is, should U.S. continue to sell weapons to Ukraine? So let's go back to my previous point, which was to say that basically what's happening, the U.S. right now is losing ground. Is the clock, like I always say, the clock is ticking. Be aware what's happening. Why is the clock ticking? Well, the manufacturing has declined from 30% in 2000 to 16% today. Critical industries like semiconductors, batteries, steel, machine tools, EV components are increasingly dominated by China. Now, as long as everyone plays together nicely, that's great. But as you could say, people are not playing that nicely anymore together. What are the risks? Aging infrastructure, over-reliance on global supply chain. You know what that means, over-reliance on global supply chains? It means that if tomorrow China says, you know what, I don't want to deal with this guy anymore, no more medicine for you. It means, don't forget, the U.S. is relying heavily, right, in terms of pharmaceutical product. 90 to 95% of active pharmaceutical ingredients come from overseas. So basically, most of your medicine comes from China or India, the generic medicine. Now, doesn't mean that the U.S. doesn't do anything. No, the U.S. leads in R&D and biotech innovation, and that's why, when the U.S. send those letters to the pharmaceutical people, the big pharma, the 17, they say, listen, if you want us, if that's what you're going to do, if you think, if this is what's going to happen, you want us to what? Lower prices? Then we're not going to have the money to do research. But then again, we're paying, I think, some of the medicine compared to Europe 10 times more in the U.S. That's a lot of money. Can't you maybe spare a dime? So basically what's happening is the clock is ticking in the U.S. So if the clock is ticking in the U.S., it's trying to do something. And one thing you don't want is these people get closer and closer and closer together, meaning those people, meaning Russia and China and India. That's what the U.S. is trying to do, get in the middle of these three people. Say, no, because if they do and they get together and they agreeing, then they are just going to be simply buying and selling from each other. And of course, the question you could ask is, well, is this the right way of doing it? Is this the right way? You kind of, some people feel that it's tugging, you're coercing, you're being rude, you're not waiting, you're pushing, you're ignoring. Well, I will tell you that the U.S. basically, in terms of generics, import dependency, years to critical loss, 3 to 5 years. EV component, 3 to 5 years, because you're losing to China. Generic, 3 to 5 years, India, China. Steel, 5 to 10 years, a little more time there. Semiconductor, 5 to 7 years. Taiwan, South Korea, China. I don't care. Well, you should care, because if you're going to be here in 3 to 5 years, life could be very different. Now, I know that you can't do anything about it, but what you can do is be aware it's coming. It's coming, and prepare yourself for it. Right? Prepare yourself. Well, imagine if you tomorrow there's no generic drugs. 29 votes. What happens when Ukraine has to surrender half its arsenal to Russia? Can anyone say Afghanistan? Wow. Well, yes, that's a very interesting topic right there from Nito. Afghanistan was a whole can of worm that, frankly, should do something. Well, there's nothing going on in Afghanistan. I don't know how many people will be interested in finding out about Afghanistan right now. But the point is, there's historical significance, huge amount of historical significance. And that is what's important. And that is what you need to understand what is going on, because at the end of the day, you want to know, you want to understand, and you want to plan. Because right now, the way I'm seeing this thing, I am very concerned. Because really, if you look at all the, if you look at all of the everyone involved, yeah, and what they want. If you look at if you were to see a table, basically that talks about, the goals comparison, right? In terms of section, I mean, Ukraine basically want to maintain all territory. I guess you want to keep fighting because the U.S. is willing to trade and Europe maintain or increase until Russia withdraw. Europe, unfortunately, that's going to be a tough thing to get because I know they want to help Ukraine and they want to be close to Ukraine, but you got then stop to pony up a lot more. But Ukraine cannot win without the U.S. The Ukraine role in talks must be present and agree to all terms. That's what Ukraine says. Obviously, Europe says it insists Ukraine be central to talks, nothing without Ukraine. But, I mean, the U.S. prefers Ukraine to be included, but could negotiate framework with Russia first. Yeah, you're going to be involved, but I got to talk to the guy first. No, I want to be involved. Don't talk to him. But then we're not talking. Then we keep fighting. Then you keep fighting, but I can't allow that to happen. I cannot allow you to keep fighting with Russia because you're weakening Russia, and the weaker Russia gets, the closer Russia gets to China. It's not about the fighting. It's about something else. It's about the interest of the U.S. Can the U.S. win against BRICS, says Nello. That's exactly what we're talking about. BRICS is, well, Brazil, which is having a tough time right now. I will tell you, 50%. I think they want to talk, but 37 votes. Okay, good. Let's keep going. BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. Don't forget, they actually came up with a club. They don't have a currency. They don't have an army. They just got together. If you want a sign of these people getting together, you look at BRICS. That's a very dangerous thing, and it's there for everyone to see. And the more you're pressuring Russia, you're cementing them. The first cementing that the U.S. helped, quote unquote, is by basically weaponizing the dollar. Right? There's a term that I use all the time, and I want you to understand, what is meant by, because that's when you try the hard way as opposed to discussing. No discussion, weaponizing the dollar. What does that mean? Well, basically, because the dollar is a reserve currency, it is needed for everything. You say, well, then you can't have everything because you cannot have the dollar because we control it, right? With Russia, it meant using the US dollar dominance in global finance as a tool of economic warfare. So basically, the US is starting this economic warfare. Be careful because it could come back and haunt you later on. Not just normal sanctions, but deliberately cutting Russia off key parts of the dollar-based system. Whenever you want to try foreign currency, whenever you want to try SWIFT, you may not be fully aware, but it's happening every day. Russia is out. I said, well, you buy your oil by yourself. And that's why what's happening with India is Russia is basically going to India and saying, do you want to buy my oil at 30% off or whatever? Sure, I'll take it. I need it. So by doing that, you pushed Russia closer to the others, cutting off most global trade, even between two non-U.S. countries. We're not just talking, some of you might be in this business, but is invoiced and settled in U.S. dollars. All of the trade in the world is done by the U.S. dollar, and the reason it's done by the U.S. dollar is because the dollar is a reserve currency. If you have that piece of paper anywhere in the world, you could be in the middle of the jungle, it means something. People say, okay, fine, I'll give you food for that because I know I could take it for someone else. And yes, Robin is also right that the dollar value is dropping. The signs are there. The signs are there. The dollar is dropping. Economic production is dropping. These people are getting closer and closer together. Be very aware of that. That is happening. So basically, for the weaponizing of the dollar, this makes it hard for Russia to pay for imports or receive export. Good for them. Let them suffer a little bit. in the most liquid and widely accepted currency. Russia's central bank reserves held in dollars abroad were frozen. You literally took their money, meaning Moscow can't use hundreds of billions of foreign currency reserves. Wait, but I thought my money was safe. No longer. We're keeping it. Dollar-based security deposit in U.S. on allied institutions are also blocked. Really? You're playing hardball. Well, I mean, you invaded a country for no reason. Okay. The U.S. threatens to penalize other countries that help Russia transact in dollars. So basically, you kept the U.S., the Russia out of the system completely. Since commodities like oil, gas, metals are often priced in dollars, restriction in U.S. ability to move dollars make it harder to sell global buyers without big discounts. Big discount. That's what happened. That's why the reason why India, gets its oil cheaply. So the dollars rolled in the world's reserve currency gives Washington enormous leverage. Weaponizing turns that leverage into a strategic weapon. So the U.S. is actually using it as a weapon, crippling Russia global trade, weakening its economy, and forcing it towards alternative system. So that's what the BRIC is all about. Then say, well, wait a second here. So next time, whenever the U.S. doesn't like us, that's it. It's like having a gun to your head, because we didn't invade the U.S. We invaded Ukraine. What does that have to do with anything? So if you don't like what's happening, if you buy something from a neighbor, you will have money to buy something from you. Yes. I mean, just for a piece of paper, if you think about it. So reparation and justice. What are the end game goals comparison? 49 votes. That's it. We got enough votes. Let's take a look at the votes. Wow. So basically, that's the thing. Should the U.S. continue to sell weapons to Ukraine? No. Should Ukraine concede territories? No. So basically, I'm not going to give you any more weapon, but you shouldn't give up your country either. And we don't really view this Russia meet. So basically, if I look at the Russia meet favorably with a no of 59%, I mean, this is not the entire United States, but should continue to say, well, no, basically it feels to me that the you basically saying, you know what, no, I'm just, obviously, no, one thing I have to say about this answer, should U.S. continue to sell weapons? If there are no weapons, then there's no fighting. If there's no fighting, well, of course you're going to say, no, but if you're not selling weapons to Ukraine, then Russia is gonna come over and take over all of Ukraine, I guess. You gotta pick a side. You can't just be no. You have to pick a side, because what's going to happen here is going to be a lot of damage after some time. It's going to be a lot of damage. Now, why do we talk about these topics? Well, at the very least, on this topic, I want you to realize that even though this thing is going to happen so far away, right? If China gets to have Russia on its side, okay, that's going to be it. Basically, China benefits from Russia as a sanction-busting partner. It's a source of cheap energy. They could get together, right? If Russia feels it can't get security guarantees without relying entirely on China, it may be more willing to hedge its China ties. They may be starting to trade with each other, working with each other. Okay, but I'm over here. How is that going to impact me? It will impact you, because then, if you think about it, you have China plus Russia and now India, because I don't know if you notice, India is not so happy with the U.S. anymore. For good reason or bad reason. The point is, right now, The US is trying to get India to do something, but it cannot. Maybe, and don't forget, they're all part of BRICS. Then they could start trading with each other and they don't need you anymore. Then the US, it's not so much making America great again, it's trying to keep America relevant. Still, that's the idea. Do you want to be in a country where nobody sells to you? Because now, if you want to buy medicine from China, you're going to have to pay up a lot. Then you have no medicine, no semiconductors, no technology, right? The US is relying heavily on China right now. Let me tell you exactly. The U.S. is relying heavily on China because of everything that's happening right now. It's relying on this technology. It's relying on pharmaceutical item, on the EV component. It's relying on everything. On a lot. Let's put it this way. And do you want this to go on and on and on? No, not forever, because that's going to be very difficult to maintain. That's going to be a lot of damage ultimately for everyone involved, and especially the people living in the U.S. American doctors are leaving the United States. Put that money in the healthcare system. The healthcare system alone is a big topic. The healthcare system alone is an issue. Okay. Don't forget some super chats. I'd like to have some coffee if you don't mind once in a while. Would appreciate that very much. So what is the likelihood that all these things, how are all these things going to resolve themselves? Right? How is that going to happen? Well, if you look at the 12-month outlook, right, in terms of the probability that each of these events are going to happen, meaning Ukraine gets its full list, full territory restoration, Crimea, reparation, trials, the odds over the next 12 months is 5 to 10%. So that's probably not going to happen. Can the U.S. get what it wants? Well, quick ceasefire, reduce costs, some Russia, China loosening, a little bit more likely, maybe 15 to 25%. What about Europe? Reverse completely gain, stronger Europe, security order, 10 to 20%. How about Russia? Can they get what they want? 10 to 20%. De facto recognition of gain, sanction relief, and NATO, 10 to 20%. So the odds for the US, Europe, and Russia to get what they want, which is kind of different, is about even, 20, 20, 20. Ukraine, very unlikely to get what it wants. That's getting the full list, like getting everything they want. When it comes to the core minimum, maybe Ukraine getting durable security guarantees and major aid and no forced concessions, 25 to 35%. The US, 40 to 50%. Europe, 40 to 50%. Like basically you get more or less what you want, right? Politically sellable. Like the US gets stop spending money, Ukraine arm, de-escalation, you get, it's 50%. So the odds of all of these happening, the full list is very small. The core minimum, maybe 40, 50%. And most likely outcomes is going to be for Ukraine, continued stalemate, incremental gain, more aid, no formal peace. For US, frozen conflict, cost containment, no big Russia split, 50 to 60%. The point is, my friends, is that going forward, what's going to happen is the longer this thing lasts, why have American consumer allowed this to happen? Well, John, it's a good question from John Stevens. The reason this has been allowed to happen is it's not a one-day thing. Like this thing that's happening here, it's taking time. Well, what has been happening little by little by little what we're having is we are getting more and more away from the reality, right? I mean, originally the idea was, well, we're a big world, right? Everybody likes each other. So yeah, let's make the pharmaceutical item overseas. It's so much cheaper, and so that the U.S. corporations make more money because it's made cheaply, and they bring in the U.S. here, sell them for 10 times the price that you're making. Big businesses are taking the job overseas for cheaper labor. Well, I mean, isn't that what the company is supposed to do? Make more money? I mean, and then if you have more money, you could open more jobs and create more jobs in the U.S. So it's different kind of job, more research jobs, less factory jobs. That's what's happening, right? Because the U.S., in terms, if you think about pharmaceutical, the U.S. is big on research. So we don't want people to work in the factories. We want people to work in the labs. Let them work in the factories in China. Well, but we have access to this. Of course, you have access to this. Do you have $1? Yeah. Well, then you just send $1, and they send you so this is good. Could they stop doing it? Well, remember what the U.S. did by weaponizing the dollar with Russia. What prevents China to weaponize the pharmaceutical products? Well, we're going to send you your Claritin, but we need something in return. What do you want? Well, you have nothing I want anymore because I make everything here. You know what I mean? That could be a lot of damage, because then everything that you make is not available anymore. So it's okay not to make shoes and sneakers and T-shirts, but is it okay not to be able to make all the things that the U.S. is, weaponry and weaponry and pharmaceutical item and all this stuff that you're not making? Well, then let's make it ourselves. Now, obviously, if you're going to make it yourself, then the cost of that is a cost to that, right? Because now energy needs to be you're going to be producing, you're going to be doing less research, which is basically what the pharmaceutical companies have said. They have said, okay, you want us to basically instead of selling what do we call what did they sell the items in why drug prices? Well, instead of selling diabetes drugs like Januvia for $547 a month in the U.S., you want us to sell it to you like we sell in Germany for $43, 10 times less, right? That's what you want us to do? Yes. Well, that's going to be a lot of damage, because that's going to cost me a lot. So I'm going to have to bring it over here, build it here, invest here. But what's going to happen is then I won't be able to do as much research anymore. Well, maybe you don't need to make 100%. I mean, 100%. You don't need to make 10 times the amount of money. Maybe you should be making 8 times or 7 times. Fine. But then my stock is not going to be as worth, and my price and my stockholders are going to get hurt. And if you people own stocks in pharmaceutical company, although that's not happening right now, you know what I mean? So that's going to be the impact. So maybe you should stay away from pharmaceutical stocks, even though they're making a great amount of money. I mean, look at the profit that they're making. And that's what they're trying to do, is saying, well, no, we don't want that. We want the U.S., well, you can't have it. So you have to decide where you want to be. And frankly, at this point, now, of course, with all these countries wanting things and the odds, when I look at the odds of all these things happening, being at more or less the same, that the most likely outcome is around 50 to 60%, so you have a bottleneck. At some point, you need to move one way or the other. You cannot have it all. Well, you can keep fighting. Yeah, but the more you keep fighting, that is not good for the U.S. That is not good for the U.S. because then Trump, the administration, basically is going to say, well, I mean, so I got to give you more weapon, which upsets MAGA a lot, keeps me involved in a war that I do not want to be involved. The U.S. government does not want to keep fighting this war, because this is not what the MAGA and the MAGA movement put the current administration in power at the White House. So we don't want to keep fighting. We have to stop fighting. Then, right? So I don't want to. I want to keep doing this. That's not going to be helpful to me. That is not going to be helpful to me. I said, well, then, right. So that's the situation. And going forward, the longer it lasts, so the U.S. is giving weapons, and then on top of that, Russia is getting weaker, right? I mean, I guess they have to keep selling oil and do their thing in the background. I mean, I don't know exactly what the economic situation in Russia, but you can't fight forever. And then, of course, yeah, the weaker you're going to get, you're gonna need somebody to help you out. And that's the question. So let's find out: is the U.S. going to be successful with the Ukraine-Russia talks? Let's see if we have some. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Not like that. Let me put this as a. Let me put this as a. As a poll. Let's see if we're feeling positive about this. But I will tell you that this better work very well, because right now, with everything that's going on at once, now of course a lot of people say, well, the U.S. said that they were gonna do something, and they would stop fighting, and the U.S. would get what it wants, and not really. The U.S. did not get what it wanted. Right now, what the U.S. that's gotten so far is really he's gotten the mostly the money from the tariffs, but that's not enough. I mean, don't forget that the money from the tariffs is really a way to. It's a mean into an end. It's a mean to an end, and the end is basically we need to have the money come. We want to be relevant again, so we want the money to be invested in the U.S. and bring into the U.S. But is this really what's happening? I am concerned that ultimately it is an impossibility, and when things push in all corners and there's no real winner, but yet everything right? Time is the enemy, and everything is squeezing and pushing and tugging and getting closer and closer. At some point, something needs to give up. Either the U.S. say, you know what, as I believe you said, let me double check. You said in the surveys, right? You said that we should not. Should Ukraine concede territory? No, which that's nice, but is that really possible? And should U.S. continue to sell weapons to Ukraine? You say no. You say no more weapons. Now, does it mean that Russia is going to take over completely? No, that means that potentially Ukraine is going to lose. What does that mean, lose? Well, lose whatever they thought they were going to gain, which means Russia stays where it wants, and you're going to find out really what they want, which is basically maybe just keep what they would keep them away from Russia, and then they go away, and everything works itself out. And of course, the Europeans are going to say, no, we don't agree. You should push back. Then you send the money. Then you create the weapon and you give it to Ukraine to fight Russia. Which this is something that they have not done well. I don't think Russia wants Alaska back. Coast cider, no way. So they basically trying to to concede and trying to get this thing together back and forth, but may not happen this way. It may be a lot more complicated, a lot more difficult to actually get what you want. And the reason why it's going to be difficult because they all want different goals, right? So what do they want? They want a lot, and they want many things, right? So basically, what's happening really is what does the U.S. want? The U.S. wants to stop the fighting in Ukraine. What does the U.S. really want? The U.S. really want to keep Russia away from China. What do the European ones? Well, they basically want to stop the fighting. They want to pull back the territory, and they want strong security guarantee. And basically, what they're saying is, give everything back, and we'll make sure that this peace between. We'll put maybe some troops in between, but concede that you lost and go home. Basically, what does Russia want? Russia wants glory, right? And they want security guarantee from NATO that you're not going to get any closer. And also, they want to keep what they've had. But they also want what they really want. They want the U.S. to stay away from Europe. What does Ukraine want? Well, Ukraine unfortunately wants it back, all of it, and reparation, and Russia to go back as losers, and that is not, they might want it back, but they aren't going to get it. No, I mean, have you seen? Do you think that Putin is going to give it up and say, okay, I'm sorry. All right, make sure that you don't become NATO member and I'm going home. Wow. He's going to, I mean, I'll be nice, but I don't think so. And of course, the issue, as we're going back and forth, as we're arguing, as we are talking, Russia is getting weaker. The U.S. is getting more enthralled in this war, which they say they did not want to get involved. And don't forget, the U.S. is doing two things. It's trying to keep Russia, at least talking, at least we're talking, and it's trying to keep India to talk, because try to keep India away from Russia, Russia away from China, trying to keep these people to get together. Imagine the discussion when they all know what they want and when they don't want. It's not like Russia does not realize that the U.S. is doing this because it doesn't want it to be close to China. And it's not like the U.S. also knows that Russia is doing this by keeping it away from its historical allies. They all know it. They all know what's happening. This is not a big mystery. The question is, and this is where it becomes very difficult, the question is, well then, how did it all resolve? Because it needs to be resolved. And it needs to be resolved for the simple reason that if it doesn't get resolved in an adequate way, then you have the next level. When I mean, it's only cut water to Crimea, but do you think Crimea wants to go back? I mean, I'm not an expert on Crimea, but my remember is that when you look in the back, they weren't so unhappy to have Russia come over. It's not like they were fighting. They spoke Russian. I mean, I don't know really the history behind it. But the point is, it's been 10 years. What are you going to... Zelensky wants that country back? Is he serious? Or does he want to keep fighting? Why does he want to keep fighting? Does he want to stay in power maybe? I don't know. You have to understand what these people want, what they really want. And they all know what they really want. It's just then how do you decide anything? How do you agree? Well, obviously we're not agreeing. The only issue for the U.S. and for my subscribers is this. If they don't agree, and because right now, remember, nothing stays still, right? Even if you don't do anything, you're doing something. What do I mean by that? Well, if you don't do anything and you leave it the way it is, then Russia is getting weaker. That's good, right? No, it's not good. Because the weaker they get, the closer they get to China, they want to survive. So they're going to get closer to China and say, yeah, I'm more than willing to help you. Then come to me. Come to BRICS. India, same thing. Stop buying oil from Russia. No, I can't. I'm having a discount. I can't do it. Well, Very disappointing. I thought we had a relationship. Well, I guess we don't have it. Well, I guess you don't. Well, then again, I'm going. And then that's it. Now you have all of them together. How is that impacting you? I will tell you. With the US losing its control and them getting stronger together as a group, let's say, you know what? We don't need the US anymore. Not openly. It's not war that you need to be concerned about because, you just push a button, everybody goes. Nobody, and they all know that. They're not going to fight it out. So why is Putin willing to talk now? Because he's getting weaker and weaker, and he'll accept he has gone so far. But will Zelensky accept that? No, I tell you what Zelensky wants. Zelensky wants basically, I want Crimea back. I want you to pull back all the way to Russia, and I want reparation, right? And if I could be part of NATO, that would be nice too. And you truly believe that you're going to get that because obviously you're asking for it. And you see, that's what I mean. This is what this channel is about, to explain to you what they're really thinking behind. Maybe there's something else that's driving Ukraine or Zelensky himself, right? Don't forget, they haven't had any elections for a while there. Do all Ukrainian wants to keep the fight going, knowing that the other guy is not going to give up, knowing that the U.S. is getting tired, knowing that the U.S., they support this war even though we're not in it. And this is why you saw recently, basically the government saying, well, I am not actually part of this war. I am trying to end it, right? Because that's what the MAGA people, right? You're my power. You want me to stop fighting wars, but we're not giving weapons. We are selling the weapons. And they said, fine for now, proxy war. Neto is right. And it's interesting to look at it because next time when you look at the news, you're going to see what happens, right? For example, right now, India was supposed to meet with the U.S. It was supposed to meet with Japan and in Australia and the U.S. and India in September, but they postponed it. They postponed it, and that's a sign, right? That's a sign that you don't want to talk to us. Well, obviously not, because you're pestering me by forcing me to stop buying Russian oil, and you know I can't do it, and I know what you're trying to do, but I'm not willing to give up that relationship. They're next to us, and frankly, no. I want to keep my options open. I don't want to give it up. I know that, for example, the U.S. wanted to have a quad leader meeting among the U.S., India, Australia, and Japan, but they got postponed and got delayed because what's happening. But Modi, the Prime Minister of India, will attend the SCO summit in China. Will visit China in August 31st to September 1st, making it his first trip since 2019. He will also meet Japan's PM in Tokyo. So that is happening, right? He's moving forward. Don't forget, is the U.S. going to be successful with this Russia-Ukraine discussion? So it's happening. Putin planned to visit India by the end of 2025, as confirmed by the Indian National Security Advisor. So this is happening. How is that going to happen? How is that going to impact you? I will tell you it's going to impact you. They get together, they close, they're just basically, not officially, but they just trade with each other. They don't trade with the U.S. anymore. Since the dollar is getting weaker, you don't know how to make anything anymore. We don't need your energy. We don't need your technology. We don't need the dollar. Why do we need you? So now you're going to go out and look for things, or you're going to have to build it yourself. And you don't, look what's happening, for example, with rare minerals. I mean, 90% is made in China. You're going to say, but how did we let it get to that? I frankly didn't know what rare minerals were, until recently. And you need rare minerals. And rare minerals is totally under the control of China. Okay, thank you, everyone. We don't need you. You do your thing, we do our things, and you go and make your things. And you're going to see how life in the U.S. is going to change drastically because you forgot how to make the stuff, or you're not making enough of it. This could be chaos, like um, um, COVID chaos. It could happen. So basically, without the U.S. consumer, India is nothing. Well, yes. I mean, right now, right? Right now, I will tell you. It's a good question, actually. What does India need from the U.S.? Okay. Why is India reliant on the U.S.? Well, it's not in a traditional dependency way, but instead the relationship is built on strategic, economic, and technology collaboration. For example, the U.S. is India's largest trading partner. So you're right. They should be worried about that, right? Yeah, you're right. They should be, because the U.S. is India's largest, surpassing China with 128 billion. So pharmaceutical, software, textile, machinery, right? They're exporting all this stuff, and they're getting electronics, aircraft, energy, and tech products. So U.S. companies are major investors in India. India depends on U.S. tech firms for cloud infrastructure, chips and semiconductors, big tech platforms. The U.S. is one of India's top defense partners. India buys U.S. drones, aircraft, but yet, when Trump said don't buy the oil from Russia, they say, well, hold on, what do you mean don't buy? I mean, obviously, I can't say no to the guy. Well, John, America needs India because the same way America is trying to make a deal with Russia, because you got to keep everyone small, I guess, or not together, because then if they get closer and closer together, right, then they become stronger, and then they don't need you. Just Patrick says, just because U.S. says to India not to buy oil from Russia doesn't mean Russia isn't saying oil to somebody. Oh, no, 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 no. By the way, and this is what, and this is why the Russian, that's why Modi said, okay, let's not be hypocrites here. You guys get oil, including the European. Oil is getting around, right? Oil is getting around in various ways, and it's tough to track it. Some of it actually coming to the U.S., believe it or not. So he's saying, you don't want me to buy, everybody else is buying from the guy, in a way. I mean, maybe not in a direct kind of way. Look into it. So it's still the U.S. is a terrible foreign economic policy. Well, let's put it this way. It has been proven now that by weaponizing the dollar, it was not a good idea, because it pushed Russia closer, 2022, with China right away. That you saw that. Boom. They had in fact, there's a term that they're using now. So that's happening now. What's also happening is Russia, they're getting closer together. So you need the Indian purchasing wealth to bring the U.S. The U.S. is a terrible foreign policy, economic policy. Well, I would say well, when you weaponize the dollar, that's not good. When you're upsetting India, that's not good either, right? Because you're pushing them together. What are you going to do with Russia now? You're going to imagine all the thing in their head when they're going to meet in Alaska, right? What are you going to do with Russia? If the guy says, "Give me Crimea, give me these whatever I have, I keep, and 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 make sure that the NATO doesn't come any closer, and I'm good, and I'm going home. I go home a winner. Fine, go home. Let me talk to Zelensky. He's going to say, no, that can't be. Well, I'm not giving you your weapons anymore. Because at some point, in any kind of negotiation, someone has to lose something. You cannot get everything you want. When Ukraine say, I want everything and I don't lose anything because I didn't start anything, well, but that's not a negotiation. You may have valid reason why you want all these things, but that's not a valid negotiation technique because when you negotiate, you cannot have a deal if everybody wins something. Think world should start trade crap that has been bad for 40 years. Who financed China into a world power? Well, right? Yeah, John, in 2000, China joined the World Trade Organization, right? And they start, they say, go ahead, let's learn. Let's learn how to make all these things. Hey, nothing wrong with that. You have the right to improve yourself, and that's what they did, but at the detriment of the U.S. and in the U.S. in a certain way because these jobs went to China. But at the end of the day, it was good for the U.S. also because corporations got to make more money, become more efficient, focus on research, right? And the stocks went up, so nothing wrong with that, except that now you're becoming dependent. That's nothing to do with money. That has to do with dependency. What happened if they say, well, now we're closing the spigot for whatever reason? We closed the spigot on Russia when they invaded Ukraine. We closed the dollar spigot. And what did they do? Well, they learned to survive. And this is why we said that these countries, all these countries have interest. They don't have friends. There's no friends. Of course, when you look at the news, you want to put it in relation to what you know and that you understand, right? Is he a good person? Is he a bad person? Is he being invaded? Is he an invader? Well, and obviously when they sell you the news, they spin it in a way. They don't just report it. They spin it. They tell you that, the U.S. is upsetting India. Well, why is India upset? Because they're buying oil from Russia. Why? Or because why is Russia selling the oil so cheaply? Or because they've been attacked and they don't have access because the U.S. actually, sanction them, even though they didn't invade the U.S., invade some other country. So you just can't look at the first level like everything else in life. You have to look at the second, the third, the fourth level to really see, okay, this is how it's going to impact me. Because the world of tomorrow could be a world where basically, the U.S. is left on its own. This idea of the make America great again, well, yeah, you want to say you have a challenge as opposed to have a problem. If you were to say, I want to keep the U.S. relevant again, they're going to say, well, we're not relevant anymore. What are you talking about? That's a negative message. Herman Campos just put a Brazil flag. Yeah, Brazil is having a lot of issue. That 50% seems to be sticking for real. Can they afford 50% tariffs with the U.S.? Right? That's a potentially a lot of damage here. Okay, oh, wow. Votes, almost 50. Is the U.S. going to be successful? Let's end the poll and see the result. No. So, de facto, my friends, when you're saying that the U.S. is not going to be successful, what does that mean? Well, it means that there's not going to be a peace deal. That means they're going to keep fighting. That means that Russia is going to get closer to China. And if, you're a representative sample, I'm going to assume. And at the end of the day, that means that the worst case scenario happens, right? So they're getting closer together because, as you notice, Trump is trying to talk to all these three people. Trying to talk to China. He's talking, but it's not working. Talking to Russia, but it's not working. Talking to India, but it's not working. No, I know my poll is not a representative sample, Mike. It's just 50 people happens to be in. But I will tell you that if I do this poll, right? But basically says that it's going to be successful with the Ukraine. No. If I look at the other poll that says, should the U.S. continue to sell weapons to Ukraine? It's kind of not really. Not a no, but not really. So basically, you're not going to be successful. Don't sell weapons to Ukraine. Now, combined, it tells me, let it go. Basically, let it go. You're wasting your time. And then when I said, should Ukraine concede? No, meaning, well, obviously, fight for your own business. And then when I look at the previous, which is, do you view Russia meets favorable? Yeah, okay. So basically, what this is all four of them, well, which represent about 200 people, go talk to the guy. But yeah, sure, you shouldn't give up territories, but this is not going to work, and it's a big waste of time. And whatever you do, do not get us involved. So basically, it says, I don't want to get involved. America itself buying Russian oil fertilizer is like only Indian purchases funding Ukraine war. Well, that's right. Gishan is right. The U.S. is, in fact, let me, Gushlan, let me tell you exactly. I know is U.S. Getting oil from Russia? I believe they do. I mean, there's no direct U.S. import. This is an interesting point. Thank you very much for that. There is no direct U.S. import of Russian oil, right? It's zero. Having said that, there are some indirect flows. Some analysts believe Russian oil still reaches the U.S. through laundering. Russian crude shipped to India, processed into gasoline, then exported to the U.S. as an Indian product. I mean, oil. I mean, how do you know where the oil come from? This is legal under current rules, but politically sensitive. So it is coming. Why do we need U.S. oil? I mean, I'm not an oil expert yet, but maybe I should look into this as to why are we getting Russian oil? It's legal. I mean, you're not getting Russian oil, you're getting Indian oil. Still, but why? But I think there's two main reasons why the U.S. might still indirectly getting Russia oil. The U.S. needs certain grade of crude and refined product, especially heavy fuel oil. Vacuum, refineries in India, Turkey, but they often use cheap Russian crude as feedstock. Often refined, the product is legally considered Indian. The U.S. ban targets Russian, changing would require stricter road. In short, it's a mix of economic necessity and political choice. Officially cutting off oil would be costly and hard to verify. Allowing refined products, it means some Russians. Well, the thing is, basically what they're saying is we need oil, that kind of oil, but we can't just say no to all oil because some of it may come from Russia. And we're not really checking. And that's why Modi is saying, and that's why he's totally right. And if I know that, he knows that. He said, you guys are getting oil from Russia too. So don't tell me I shouldn't be buying oil from Russia. Right? So because they all know this, Modi knows exactly what the U.S. wants. Basically, you want me to stay away from China, but I can't. Okay, I can't. I'm sorry, I can't do it. That's probably what they're telling each other when they meet. Okay, I cannot do it. I need you, but I need them also. And I know you're having a problem, Russia. I know you're trying to keep everybody apart, but you can't make it all up. What you should do is maybe you should be making your own stuff so you're not so dependent on all these people now. And back to this idea that the U.S. is on a ticking clock. I'm saying most people believe propaganda and doesn't think. Well, no, John, this is exactly why I created this channel. Because when I'm watching the news, right, I am not watching the news. I'm watching propaganda. And propaganda is basically telling you that, this country is invading this other country, and that's not good. Well, can we look at the reason why they're invading? No, we can't look at that. Because if you do, then you're on the other side. Okay, so then then, because some people will make you the point that the reason, in fact, I think the U.S. government made it itself, the reason why Russia did what they did, right, is because they felt that Ukraine was unstable and NATO was getting closer and closer. So are you saying that it's a good thing that they invaded Russia? No. They invaded Ukraine? No. But you need to understand. Well, we can't understand. Well, then if you don't understand, then obviously Russia is a bad guy and that's it. But you can't think in those terms, because otherwise it's just propaganda. You need to, you need to look at what's driving them. I mean, after all, the U.S. has attacked. Remember what the U.S. did when Russia did what they did, right? They basically weaponized the dollar and they confiscating all the money they had in banks. Can you do that? Yeah, because you invaded this country. Yeah, but you push these countries to get closer, and you knew this was going to happen. Unless you want to weaken Russia, maybe, right? That's what you want to do. You want to keep Russia, away from China. But you did the opposite, because sometimes, what you think you're going to do, you do the opposite, right? Because you're trying to, like, for example, U.S. administration trying to pressure India into getting close, but by doing that, you may get the opposite. Benzo said, America can't produce everything we buy. There are some things that can't be produced here, but if we did it, it would increase the price of those products astronomically. Benzo is, where are you, Brazil? No. No, I mean, America can't produce everything. You have to understand, this is all about interests. What interests they have. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because besides talking about Russia, we are also following, 11 potential black swans. There's the economic black swan that we worry about, because right now the U.S. is fine, believe it or not, right now. GDP is up 3%. Inflation is under control, quote unquote. There's some weaknesses in employment. That's a concern. But the unemployment rate is only 4%. The stock market is going higher and higher. But I want to remind everyone that in terms of performance, the U.S. is up year to date 8%. England, Germany, Italy, Spain, Canada, Brazil, all these countries' stock market beat the U.S. stock market year to date. Think about that for a second. So there's a lot of noise, a lot of movement, lots of things happening saying this is great. But year to date, I'm sorry. And the reason why this is happening, because you took a huge dump at the beginning of in April because of the tariffs. So no, year over year, still the market is up 20%, but Germany, Italy, Spain, Shanghai, Canada are doing better. So technically, not to be one way or the other, the U.S. is not doing, it's doing, I mean, overall it's okay, but it's not the most incredible stock market in the world right now, right? People are just, everybody's making money, I guess, so green. There's only one stock market that's not doing well, which is Sensex. But everyone's making money here, everywhere. Just some people are making more money than other people. That's the only thing. The other thing that we're doing in this channel is the dollar. We're monitoring the dollar. It is getting weaker, as we all know. The tariffs, that in itself is a problem. Why? Because it is being used, quote unquote, legally right now. Although this is being reviewed, but I don't think they could do much of anything. Because these are emergency situations. And it is an emergency situation if you think about it, right? The U.S. clock is ticking. It's losing its industrial production, pharmaceutical, everything is made overseas. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So the tariffs are a method. Now, is it the right method? Is it going to come bite the U.S. later on? That's a question. Is it being done effectively? Well, because usually when you do a trade agreement, it takes years. It doesn't take 3 days or a week, and definitely not over 100 countries via a letter. Is that the right way of doing it? That's going to be history is going to be the guide. Now, of course, on top of everything else, the administration is trying to pressure the Fed, and it seems to be working because one of the governor left. One market will be ahead of the. Which market is that? Yeah, I'm not tracking the that market, unfortunately. Can Trump be removed from his post for mass protests all around? You see, what kind of question is that? Yeah, you can't think in those terms. If people don't like him, they vote him out. You can't remove someone, right? The U.S. is a country of law. Just because a bunch of people goes in the street and say we don't like him, that's fine. Look what happened with Tesla, right? Elon Musk. They went around and they complained. They burned his cars down. No, this is not that kind of system. And maybe that's why everybody wants to invest in the U.S. That once somebody is in, you don't like him, you vote him out. You just don't kick him out. That doesn't work. Otherwise, who kicks him out? 20 people, 100 people? When there's 300, 200, 350 million people in the U.S. That's not happening. Tariffs are supposed to make foreign pricing more aligned with America's cost of production. In theory, Sphere, well, when it depends what kind of level. Don't forget, these tariffs are the highest since 1930. Okay. And right now, and I'll do a thing on the tariff next week, but it's a lot. It would have worked. It would have been done with Biden. We need to stop shipping our dependency overseas. Well, I mean, that's obvious. No, theoretically, that shouldn't be a problem to ship your dependency because there's a cost of bringing it back. The cost is then you can't do other things. And these other things that you can't do, don't forget the U.S., when we say the U.S. export and production, 80% of what the U.S. GDP is all about services, banking, finance, but it sacrificed security, yes. So what are you concerned about your security? That's a problem. Yeah, I am concerned about my security. Well, then obviously you need to do something. And obviously these things don't happen from one day to the next. And the thing also, keep in mind, it's not so much security in terms of they coming over and invading us. Nobody's going to invade the U.S. That's never going to happen. But what they could do is they could say, well, I'm not selling. Remember what happened in 2020 when you couldn't find masks and you had to wait for China to make them, the N95 mask? Well, I suppose tomorrow you don't get that anymore. It doesn't have to be purposeful. Maybe there is a huge, I don't know, pandemic again that lasts for years. What do? You can't get the stuff over. No, they could do it purposely like the U.S. did against Russia by weaponizing the dollar, but they could weaponize something else against the U.S. at some point. So these are very, very difficult topics that I want everyone to follow, understand. Make sure, send me maybe what do you call these things? The super chats there. Give me a cup of coffee because I'm going to have to leave you soon. I want, and more importantly, next week we have lots of items being. I thought the tariffs were supposed to help pay down our debt. Whoa, John. I mean, maybe you collect 300 billion this year. The debt is 37 trillion. That's not going to be enough. And frankly, you have to realize that money, the way it comes through, it's going to come through the, very, very, very slowly. And the money could actually be turned over, and the money could actually go to the U.S. consumer may end up having to pay for it. So Anyway, lots of items to talk about. Lots of items to talk about next week. My friend, thank you very much for joining, and I will see you later.